Hey there, my fellow jewelry enthusiasts. Welcome to my channel, Memory Lane by Marie, and I'm Marie. If this is your first time joining me, welcome to my channel, and you caught me on a rare occasion. So I really appreciate all of my subscribers, and it turns out I have several subscribers who are new to beading, and many of them have commented on several of the jewelry pieces that I've made over the course of my time over YouTube, or over the course of my time on YouTube. And so one of the things that I often get so many compliments on is my memory wire bracelets. So because I've been asked so many times, how do I do it? How does it look so cohesive? They're so pretty. And many people feel that they, as simple as they seem, theirs never seem to come out right. So what I thought I would do is just give a short tutorial on how I go about compiling or devising my memory wire bracelets. And so before we get started, let's look at some of the things that you will need or that you can use in making your memory wire bracelet. First of all, you'll want memory wire. It comes on a coil, and depending on how long or how many coils you want for your memory wire bracelet, then you'll cut it. May I suggest that you use memory wire cutters. I learned a long time ago that you should use memory wire cutters. You can use a regular cut or snip to cut them, but it will be very difficult. These cutters or regular wire cutters make cutting the memory wire so much more simple, and you don't have to worry about ruining a good pair of wire cutters by using them. And so it gives it a nice smooth cut, and then you will cut the amount of memory wire that you want to use. I typically like to make my memory wire bracelets at least 3 coils, but I've made them as many as 5. And so again, the memory wire comes on a coil, and you will cut it to the length that you want. Again, you'll need some round nose pliers so that you can create loops in the ends of the memory wire so that your beads will not fall off. Some people are successful at doing that with these chain nose or flat nose pliers. These have a serrated inside where you can hold it. You want to be careful not to scratch the memory wire and scratch the coating off. Or bent nose pliers. Sometimes when you curl your ends of your memory wire, it doesn't close all the way, so you want to close it a little bit more with your pliers, and you don't want the loop to be too large at the end, but you do want a nice size loop, especially if you want to add charms. So I've also included charms on our list of supplies. If you want to put charms at the ends of your bracelet, then you'll need a couple of charms. You'll need some jump rings, and consequently these are the jump rings that I recently received from beadpark.com. If you were watching my bead haul and product review from beadpark.com, then you'll know that, or you'll remember that I got these jump rings from them. One of the things that I like to do, and you don't have to do it, I like to begin and end my memory wires with a bead cap. I just think it gives it a nice finish on the ends. You want to choose some type of spacer bead, whether they are daisy spacers like these or any of your choosing. I just really like daisy spacers. And you want a collection of beads. So for this bracelet that I'm going to be showing you today, I am making it for a friend, and I've chosen these colors because these are the colors that she asked for. They are actually shades and variations of the colors associated with her sorority. So I'm going to be making her a bracelet, and again, you want your selection of pliers. I really suggest going ahead and purchasing some memory wire cutters. They are a little pricey, but if you're into beading, you know that sometimes there's cost associated with our hobbies. And so again, I would definitely suggest getting some of these. You'll definitely need some round nose pliers or whatever plier you've become proficient at making loops with. I've seen people make loops with these type of pliers as well. And your memory wire and your jump rings. And so let's get into it, you guys. Okay, guys. So as you can see, I have my beads set up on a beading board, and a beading board is not essential by any means. Let us first stipulate that there is no one way to do things that are creative. And there are several schools of thought on how to do memory wire bracelets. You have the people who are die-hard patternists. They believe in patterns. You have people who say, don't think about it, just do it randomly. You just have all schools of thoughts on how to accomplish this. But however, you do want to determine what your color pattern will be. What I've learned from doing so many memory wire bracelets and just jewelry in general is you can make almost any colors fit together. We often think that, oh, these colors don't go together, or you want to break out a color wheel. I never break out a color wheel ever. I don't even know what one looks like. And I don't think I need one. We dress ourselves every day, and we know for the most part what colors go together. And I put colors together, and people were like, oh, I didn't even think to even wear those colors together. So the point is, colors can go together. It just depends on how you pull them off. But as I stated, these colors are associated with the sorority, and so I'm making this bracelet for a friend. That being said, the slots on this board are numbered. These are inches. And what I've done is typically, and I don't have it set up evenly for you to see, but I lay out my beads in a pattern at first. So typically what I'll do is I'll do about 8 inches of beads for each coil. And I do 8 inches of beads for each coil because I'm making, my wrist is about a 7-inch. However, when you do a memory wire bracelet, it stretches out a little bit and it kind of alters the pattern, even if you do a pattern, unless you're very meticulous about it. And I'm not that meticulous about it. I'm more concerned about it looking nice. And the pattern is not necessarily an indicator of if it's going to look nice unless you're just trying to do a die-hard pattern. But that being said, what I'll usually do is I'll set out my beads at every inch. So when I first started, I started with this first row. And 8 inches, this is the 0 mark. And so 4 inches this way and 4 inches this way makes 8 inches. And so I set out this coral pinkish bead at each of the inches. And then I decided, okay, which of the metal finishes do I want to go with it? And I decided upon silver. And I decided on which spacer bead I want. And again, I chose daisy spacers. You can choose any spacer bead that you choose. And then from there, I put out what colors I wanted in my second row before I even filled it in. And then I put the second row of beads on the 1/2 inch. So on the first row, I put a bead at the 4, the 3, the 2, the 1, the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here I put the beads at the 4 1/2, the 3 1/2, the 2 1/2, and in between. And then I made sure that in my last row, I incorporated colors that were present in the other 2 rows. I kind of like for the middle row to stand out. Sometimes if I'm doing a bracelet that has that's a multicolor bracelet. And so as you see, the first row and the third row, they have the pinkish coral beads, but the middle row does not. Here, instead of being very pronounced with the green, I used some fire polished beads here as spacers, and I separated the pink coral beads with green spacers here, which picks up the green beads here, and then again the green beads here. So again, I added in just a neutral color. This is a cloudy white faceted bead, and in between these beads, I brought in the pinkish coral color in another fire polish. There are no silvers here, but there are silvers here. And so there's really no set pattern as to how you create a cohesive memory wire bracelet, I want to say, other than making sure that you include the colors in each layer, unless you're going for a color block type bracelet. So again, in this first row, I have the larger pink beads with my silver spacers and smaller fire polished green. In the middle, I have large green beads with the incorporation of this white. And then as a spacer, I included the pink coral color in between. And I just spaced out the pattern. And so also you want sparkle. And so that's one of the reasons why I like to use fire polished beads or spacers on memory wire bracelets. On the third row, or the whatever the final row is, if this had been a 5 coil memory wire bracelet, then I would have done something special on the 2 inner rows, or maybe on the 2 inner rows or 3 inner rows, or just made the center row a really standout row and made the 2 rows on either side of that one match somehow. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just a matter of laying out your beads and seeing how the color patterns flow. And so we're just going to string these on. Again, this is 8 inches. This is also 8 inches, although it doesn't look like it because of the curvature of the board. Once you start putting the spacers in, of course, these are not sitting up, and so they're taking up more space. But each strand is 8 inches to account for how the bracelet will adjust when it is on your wrist. And so, again, the memory wire bracelet, or the memory wire itself. This is going to be a 3-strand bracelet. So the way I count it is I take the end, and I say from this end to here is 1 coil, and then that same spot on the next rung would be 2 coils, 3 coils, and then I just go an extra coil. Sometimes I cut it, sometimes I put one of these bead stops. And you can do it that way as well, just in case something gets off or you decide to change it, you can adjust it. Because again, when you put the beads down on the bead board, as you can see, the bead spacers, they're not standing straight up as they would when they're on the memory wire itself. So your measurement could be slightly off when you're using beads that have irregular shapes. And so again, that's one of the reasons why I'll just put the bead bug or the bead stop here before I cut it. But you can certainly cut it if you want to, and you can adjust it at the other end. But I'm just going to do it that way today. So I'm going to string on the first coil and let you see how that works. So what I like to do is I like to start it off with the bead cap. So I put the bead cap on so that the decorative side will be facing toward my loop. So that goes on. And then you just string the beads on in the desired pattern. So there's my bead, there's my bead. My spacer bead, my daisy spacer, and then in between there I'm going to put these 3 fire polished beads. I believe this is like a mint green of some sort. Again, I'm sticking with the pink and green, the coral and mint. It's all in the same family, and I'm just stringing it on. And you check it as you go to make sure it's looking the way you want it to look. And that's all there is to it, you guys. So I'm going to continue stringing. And I will come back and speak to you when I have completed the whole pattern for the first coil. Okay, there you have it. Put a few more on so that you can see it. Again, the pattern is the pink bead, the spacer bead, or the daisy spacer. Then I have 3 fire polished. And I like the idea of odd sometimes. Again, there's no pattern all the time. There's no rule. But some people say odd numbers look better. And so I'll go with them. And so then you make sure they come down. You send it down so that you can see it, right, all the way down to the bead stopper. And you can see the pattern emerging. And just scoot them all the way down. And there you have it. And so I'll come back when that first round is completed. Okay, you guys, so now I have strung the entire first round. As you can see, here is the beginning. Hope it's not too confusing. Here's the beginning and the end where my bead clip was. And as you can see, they don't line up. They kind of go past each other just a little bit to account for when you wear it, it'll do that, right? So that is the purpose for going over my 7-inch wrist to about 8 inches of beads, you know, 7.5 to 8 inches of beads, to account for when you put it on and there's a little stretch to it. Because of course, this is just the diameter of this memory wire itself is just 2.5 inches, I believe. I believe this is just 2.5 inches. So it's going to stretch anyway. All right, it's going to stretch anyway. And so again, remember, I like to start with the bead cap because that gives it just a finished end. Eventually here will be the loop. And so now that is the completed first round. Can you see that? I'm going to go ahead and put this bead stopper back on. Go ahead and put the bead stopper back on. And of course, go ahead and put the bead stopper back on to hold that snug. All right, push the beads all the way around, and then now we're on our second row. So again, in the first row, there are the pink and the green beads, large pink beads with daisy spacers to bring in an element, a metal element, and you can bring in whatever color metal element you want. And consequently, they do sell memory wire bracelets or memory wire in other colors, but most of the time you don't even see the wire. So it may or may not matter to some people. It doesn't really matter to me because most of it is covered. And I mostly use silver findings anyway when it comes to these. But it's never made a big difference, even when I didn't. But that being said, so the first coil is done. Here's your second row. Again, if you want to just be sure, you can bring it down here where the numbers are closer to your beads. But again, this is about 8 inches. And so what I did is I took the green beads and then I added the white ones. And then I said, well, what do I want to do to enhance that? And then I went into my stash and I pulled out some fire polished beads. And so on either side of my patterned beads, I added the fire polish to bring in the color from the other row of beads. And I added those on either side. So if you bring it down just to show you, I put them on either side of the green beads just to add to the pattern. It adds sparkle. It adds cohesion by just bringing in the other color slightly, but it still sticks out enough. It's accented enough. And there you have it. So again, that's about 8 inches. But again, as you can see on my board, I have additional beads just in case I need to add in. And that's one of the reasons why I did not close off my coil yet. Again, you can. It's not a science, you guys. It's creativity. It's not baking, it's cooking, right? The measurements and do not have to be exact in this particular type of bracelet. And so again, the first ring is done, and the first coil is done. And we can go ahead and string on our next row. I typically like to add some type of spacer between my second and you know, between each of my levels or each of my coils. And so here I have a spacer. So I'm going to go ahead and add that daisy spacer before I string on my next row, which is my green bead, and then my pinkish coral fire polish as a spacer, and a little bit of cohesive coloring as well as some sparkle. There's my rondelle, my neutral in the mix of my colors. Again, there's my color, my pink color that I'm bringing in. There's my green. And you just follow your pattern. If you wanted to do it randomly, you very well could. But even in doing things randomly, you have to pay attention that you are not doubling up. You don't want, in your request to do it randomly, you're not paying attention and you have too many colors in one spot, or you have too many of the same beads. So even in, I think it's, can you call it a control randomness? Even if you're doing it randomly and not in some strict pattern, you still need to pay attention to the fact that you are not putting too many beads that look alike and it starts to look thrown together. And I think maybe that may be the mistake that some of you are making. You don't want it to look too patterned, and so you go random, and then it's not a control randomness, if that makes sense at all. So as you can see, this is starting to come together. And we are just stringing our colors, making sure that we are liking what we see as we go. You just push it down. You can check it every so often. Push the V's around. And you can see how it'll look. And so, see, it's coming together. And so there's our first row. Here's our second row. And you can see where it pulls in color from this row ever so slightly, ever so delicately. It's not obvious, but it looks cohesive because I'm not trying to be too matchy-matchy, but I do want to pull in colors so that it looks like it flows. There's no abrupt color change. Although there is style in color blocking, that's just not the objective of this particular bracelet. So I'll continue to string on the rest of this coil. A few more here. While we do that, okay, and there's our fire polish, and there's our neutral, fire polish, for sparkle, of course. And again, you want to make sure that the holes in your beads are large enough when you choose them to go for the for the memory wire to fit through. I've wanted to do this with pearls, but of course the holes in pearls are often very small. But I believe this would make a gorgeous pearl bracelet. Some pearls do have larger holes. And so I'm gonna go ahead and finish this off, you guys, and I will meet you back here once our second coil is complete. Okay, so I'm back, guys. So now the entire second coil of my memory wire bracelet has been strung, and as you can see, this is where the previous color pattern ends and the new one begins. And you can see where it ends just a little bit past where it begins, to account again for the movement that will happen right when you put it on. See? And so now you can see first level or first coil, second coil, and now we're going to begin our third coil. And as I stated, I like to separate mine by a daisy spacer regardless to what was happening, or a spacer bead, whatever one you choose, regardless to what was happening. So I'm going to go ahead and add my spacer, which in this case is a daisy spacer, before I begin my third pattern or my third coil. And as you can see, because I did it a little bit, I cut it a little bit. I didn't cut it, but as you can see, I accounted for a little bit over. Right here, it already looks like 3 coils, even though I'm really going for a 3 coil memory wire bracelet. And you want that little overage because it's going to stretch. It's going to stretch. So technically it's 2, but see on the back it looks like 3 because this is where they overlap. And so now we're going to string our third level or our third row. And as you can see in the third row, I have incorporated almost all of the colors. And so this is a pattern. You have the pink and the green separated by a silver. And so it is patterned, but it's not patterned all the way through. Each level has its own pattern, and each level kind of builds and accents and pulls from the other, whether it is boldly or whether it is done subtly. And so we'll go ahead and string these. As you can see, all of these beads are relatively large. There's some smaller beads on the inside, level or inside coil. However, it doesn't really matter. Typically, if you're going with a memory wire bracelet, though, I would suggest keeping the heavier beads away from the ends of your bracelet and kind of concentrate them in the middle, so that it doesn't sag. But in this case, I don't think that will be an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and string on my last pattern. It's the pink and the green trio separated by a silver ball, and I'm just going to go ahead and string that on. These are bigger beads, they'll go a little bit quicker, but this was also 8 inches of beads, but of course because they are larger they will take up more space and they will take fewer beads, so you may have to go a little bit beyond the 8. Even though the 8 was going a little bit beyond the 7 for the sake of the stretch. Because these beads are larger, you may go a little bit beyond the 8 to account for the size of the bead, if that makes sense. And so our very last coil of our 3-round memory wire bracelet is almost complete. And there's our last pink coral bead, and again I like to end it with a bead cap. This is going to be the end, and so you want the bead cap to be facing the bead because we're going to put the coil on this end. And so now I just want to pull it all the way down so that you can kind of see how the bracelet will look. So just string it all the way around so that you can kind of see how it looks. And I hope the fact that I'm leaving the additional wire on here is not confusing you too much. I just like to be safe, and leaving the additional wire on kind of helps. Leaving the wire on kind of helps just in case you mess up. Of course, it doesn't really matter. It's a memory wire bracelet. If you have to snip off a little bit, it won't make a big difference. And so you see the pattern emerging. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn my end on my memory wire bracelet to close it off. You don't want it to be too big. So there are 2 schools of thought. You can either turn it against the coil or with the coil. I like to turn it against, and so you don't want it to be too big. So I have my round nose plier here at the end. I have my finger underneath to help bend it, and so you just, and it's gonna take some effort. And you just bend it into a coil. And if it doesn't close all the way, that's when you can take your pliers and close it slightly. See that? You just take your pliers and close it slightly. And that will keep your beads on, as well as give you a place to put your charm. So now, just screw all the beads all the way down to the end. Make sure they go all the way around. No gaps. There we go. No gaps. So now it's nice and tight. Nice and tightly. See? So here it looks like 4, but it's really 3. Now if you look at where this one ends, this bead cap and this bead cap, they're kind of like almost right across from each other. See that line here? And then that's kind of where I cut it. So you just want to cut just a little bit. And don't worry about if it's a little bit over. You can coil it. I've coiled them sometimes if I cut just a little bit too much. And that's just reinforcement. It doesn't hurt anything. So you see how smoothly these cut as opposed to trying to use a regular cutter. And this is enough to make another small memory wire bracelet or a pair of earrings. And so then you do the same thing on this end. You take your round nose, and that's kind of a lot. Cut off a little bit more. Cut off just a little bit more. Hold it. There you go. And just coil it back. Put your finger underneath to help bend it. And then if you need a little assistance from your flat nose plier, just go ahead and do that. And there you have it, guys. A 3-coil memory wire bracelet. Now, if you want to add charms to the ends, you certainly can do that. And so here I've chosen a little sun charm and a little butterfly charm. So we'll go ahead and take our jump rings. And of course, open those up. Again, you twist them apart. You don't pull them apart. Go ahead. This is a double-sided charm, so it doesn't really matter. And you just go ahead and hook that on the end. And then you twist it back together. And if it's not going, you just go wiggle it back and forth. And there's the butterfly. And then on this side, we're going to do the sun charm. Again, you take your 2 pair of pliers. You twist them in opposite directions. You don't pull them. Again, this is a double-sided charm as well. Now, if it were not a double-sided charm, sometimes you have to add 2 jump rings if you wanted to hang a certain direction. But in this case, it is not necessary. And so there you have it. You just wiggle it back and forth until it closes. And there you have it, guys. Your 3-ring memory wire bracelet. Gorgeous. And your charm hangs down on this side, and it hangs down on that side of your wrist. If you like it to hang on the top, that's perfectly fine. And so go ahead and put that on. Okay, there you have it, with your charms hanging down here on this side and this side. If you like it on the top, that's fine, hanging here and here. But I think my friend's gonna like it. She's gonna feel like she's totally representing her sisterhood. What do you guys think? Not great at tutorials, you guys, but I did want to listen to the interest of my subscribers, you guys, and I do get a lot of compliments on my memory wire bracelets. It is one of my most favorite things to make. It is associated with the name of my channel, Memory Lane. It is because of my love of memory wires, and as well as what memory lane means, just all of the good memories from long ago, with family and things and such. And so that make me happy. And so yes, guys, this is a 3-round memory wire bracelet. And if you want to make more rounds, you can take the same philosophy, same concept, same school of thought, and apply it to any more rounds. Again, you figure out what your colors are going to be. You make it cohesive by adding them in subtle ways or bold ways. As you can see, the first time there's that green, but it's not bold, but it picks up the green from here. And then this row incorporates almost all of the colors, and this white kind of stabilizes it as a neutral. So there you have it, guys. Little short tutorial on a 3-round memory wire bracelet. I hope this was helpful to those of you who wanted to know how I go about it. But there are many of us who do memory wire bracelets. Again, if you search memory wire bracelets, you will find many videos on it, people who have different ways and different ideas about it. But that's just me, you guys. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. Thank you for joining me, and I do appreciate you guys. So here's your memory wire tutorial. As always, you guys, thank you, and thank you again. Have a great day.